Hi everyone, this is Professor Williamson, and this is a presentation to go over the assigned non-graded exercises at the end of Chapter 11, which relate to the circulatory system. This presentation will go over the 10 exercises under the subheading of Procedure Statement Coding. So before we look at those exercises, it's helpful to review our coding process for ICD-10 PCS. If we go back to Chapter 1 and we look at the steps, the first step is to read and review the clinical information, then think about the intention and the objective to determine our root operation, then make a note of our anatomy and our surgical approach before we go to the ICD-10 PCS coding manual. We first then go to the alpha, and then we proceed to the table portion of the coding manual. Then we make our selections, we verify selections, but then we make selections for device and qualifier. So we look at the first procedure coding statement in your textbook at the end of Chapter 11. The first statement is documented as an open excision of the right internal mammary artery to be used as graft material. The right internal mammary artery is, for the purposes of the slide, abbreviated as RIMA. The objective of this procedure is going to be removing a portion of this artery inside the heart via open procedure to be used as a graft. Typically, this would be part of a heart bypass procedure or a CABG. What is the root operation? They're not taking out all of the patient's artery of their heart, they're taking out a portion of it. The root operation is therefore excision. We're going to index the main term of excision, which is also the root operation, then the anatomy, heart, right mammary artery. Then we're given 03B0 in the alpha index. We moved to the 03B table. We verify our body part value of 0. Then we choose our surgical approach. Per our clinical information, the surgical approach was open. The character value for that is 0. Then our device character value is Z. There was no device left in this patient or addressed. There was no device already there. And then our last character value is qualifier. Was any documentation of this procedure is diagnostic in nature? The answer to that is no. So our last character value is Z. Our final code for an open excision of the right internal mammary artery for graft material is 03B00ZZ. Number 2, this patient is having percutaneous exchange of leads of a pacemaker, not the pacemaker. The pacemaker is not being touched. The pacemaker was put in 3 years ago. Today, what we're coding is the exchange of the leads. The surgeon is taking out the old leads and putting in new leads. The best match in this case is 2 root operations, removal and insertion. We can't use replacement because when we look at the definition of the root operation of replacement, it identifies biological material. These are metal leads. It also talks about that the replacement is taking over all or a portion of a body part. The leads are not taking over the heart functionality, they're helping the heart functionality. We also can't use the root operation of change because that root operation change requires that this is done without cutting or puncturing the skin. And in this case, these leads are being removed and replaced via a percutaneous approach, which does require some cutting. So the best option in our case, based on the clinical information, how this was done, surgically how this was done, is 2 root operations. We're going to code the removal and we're going to code the insertion. And this patient had 2 leads done. 2 leads were removed, 2 leads were inserted. So we go to the root operation removal in our alpha index. Anatomy is the heart. These leads were in the patient's heart. We're given the code portion of 02PA in the alpha. We move to the 02P table. We verify that A is our best choice for the body part value. There's no other selection in that area of the table that works better based on our clinical presentation, information, and what we have on the table. This surgical approach was documented as percutaneous. That relates to 3 on the table. What was touched? Was something already addressed? Was something being taken away? Yes, those were cardiac leads. That's the best option at that area of that table, which is M for cardiac leads. Z is the only option for qualifier at that 02P table at that row. This patient had 2 separate leads, one on the right and one in the right atrium and one in the ventricle. Per ICD-10 PCS coding guideline B3.2, we're going to code the code twice, one code for each lead. So it's 02PA3MZ and 02PA3MZ a second time. We do not do the times 2. Times 2 is something you see in CPT coding. That is not something we do in ICD-10 PCS. You would fully list out the full code twice. This is just the removal. We also have to code the insertion. Different table, perhaps different choices. We go to the root operation of insertion. That's what's being done. Our anatomy, 1 lead is being inserted into the right atrium and 1 lead into the right ventricle. The word atrium and atrial are synonyms in medical terminology, because in your clinical information it says right atrial, and it's right atrium when you're in the alpha index. When you index insertion atrium right, you get 02H6. You also get, when you index insertion ventricle right, you get 02HK. So your body part values are different. So you will end up having to code 2 separate codes. They are not going to be identical because the body part values are different at this particular table, 02H. So you move to the 02H table, you review your body part values. The next code value you choose is for surgical approach. It states it was percutaneous, which happens to be 3 at that particular table and row. Was a device left in the patient at the end of the surgery? Yes. What type of device? Cardiac pacemaker leads. That relates to your choice of J. And then your last character value is qualifier. The only option at that table, at that row, is Z. So you have 2 codes for the insertion. You have 02H63JZ for the right atrium and 02HK3JZ for the right ventricle. The codes are very similar, but they're not exactly the same because the body part value at that table is distinct for right atrium and right ventricle. The next one is a left temporal artery biopsy open approach to rule out temporal arteritis due to headaches and abnormal lab values. The word biopsy is used in your clinical information. What does that mean? Taking out a piece of a body part for diagnostic analysis or diagnostic information. Biopsy, again, back in chapter 3, I believe, it talks about biopsies are typically root operation of excision. You're going to index the word excision, then artery, then temporal, and then left. You're given 03BT in the alpha. You move to the 03B table, verify your body part value. The next choice is your surgical approach. States in your clinical information this was done via open approach. 0 is your choice for open. For the device character value, the only option at that table at that row is Z. For your last character value, which is qualifier, you do have 2 choices. You have X and Z at that table. The question then is, was this procedure diagnostic in nature? The answer is yes, because it states in the clinical information, left temporal artery biopsy. That word biopsy means they're looking to confirm, in this case, find out why this patient's having these temporal headaches. Therefore, X is our last character value, our final code for a left temporal artery biopsy open approach. is 03BT0ZX. The next one, per your textbook number 4, is open heart surgery for repair of an atrial septal defect with mesh. The objective is to put this mesh material on the septum wall. The septum is this piece here that separates the chambers of the heart. It's going to reinforce that area, and the root operation is therefore supplement. We're going to index supplement and then the anatomy. The anatomy is heart. We're doing this inside the heart. We're given 02UA and the alpha index. You move to the 02U table. You verify and review all your body part options at that table. You find when you do that that you have a better choice. There's a specific body part value at the table for atrial septum, because remember, the alpha index in ICD-10 PCS is a tool. Technically, you don't have to use the alpha index, but it's much beneficial to use it as you are learning ICD-10 PCS coding system. So we use the alpha index, but we are then making our final selections by the table. And when we go to the 02U table, we find a better choice for body part value, which is 5. Then we choose our surgical approach. It was documented as open. 0 is the character value for open approach. Then we have to reflect the device. Was the device left in the patient at the end of the surgery? Yes. It was a mesh device, man-made material. We choose J. And then the only option for our qualifier is Z. So for our open heart surgery for repair of an atrial septal defect with mesh, 02U, 50JZ. Number 5 is an open Blalock-Halen procedure to create an atrial septal opening for palliative treatment of transposition of great vessels. This procedure reroutes the blood from the right atrium to the left. So it's helpful if you understand what's being done and why, perhaps helps this transposition of great vessels. This is typically something you will see in a baby born with a congenital heart defect. This is one type of procedure to treat that. There's other types of procedures to treat this type of transposition of great vessels. The surgeon is creating a bypass from the right atrium to the left. The root operation is bypass. We're going to index the word bypass, then atrium. Right, we're given 0216 in the alpha. We move to the 021 table, we verify our body part value, then we choose our surgical approach. It states in our clinical information, open Blalock-Halen procedure. So we choose open, 0 is the character value for that. Was there a device left in the patient? No. We choose Z for device character. Then our last qualifier value, in this case, since we're coding a bypass, is where did it go to? It went from the right atrium to the left. So we're going to code to the left atrium for the final code. Character value is 7, and our final code is 02160Z7. Number 6, per your clinical information, your textbook, is open placement of a synthetic atriovenous graft from the left brachial artery to the cephalic vein in preparation for hemodialysis. For the discussion in your textbook, an AV graft is something that is a bypass. They're creating a new pathway. In this case, creating an artery, connecting an artery to a vein for a patient who is in kidney failure so they can have life-sustaining dialysis. This has to be done. The patient has to either have dialysis because of their kidney failure or a kidney transplant. And there's 2 ways. There's an AV fistula and an AV graft. In this case, you are coding an AV graft because that's what's documented in your clinical information. Again, the root operation is bypass. We're going to index the word bypass. Artery, brachial left, what's being bypassed. we're given 03180. In the alpha, you're given 5 character values, but you still need to finish your code. You move to the 031 table. Then you have to choose, verify your other character values. Then you have to choose your next character value is device. What type of device? It says synthetic arterial venous graft. Tells you synthetic, so you choose J. And the last character value is where is it going to. So it went from the left brachial to the cephalic vein. Where's the cephalic vein? Upper arm. So you choose the body part, or you choose the character qualifier value of D. Your final code for a open placement of a synthetic AV graft from the left brachial artery to the cephalic vein is 03180JD. Number 7 is a CABG, a double CABG, a double aortic coronary bypass graft, open approach. The patient is having the left internal mammary artery to the left anterior descending, and they're also having the left greater saphenous vein to the diagonal, which is done via open harvesting of this saphenous vein. So you have to code the bypass. You have 2 different routes being done, so you're going to need at least 2 codes for each of those routes. And you also need to code the harvesting of the saphenous vein. So they pull the saphenous vein, the greater saphenous vein, from the patient's leg, and they move that graft. They created that graft. They use that piece of their vein to create pathways, in this case, from the aorta to the diagonal. They use that vein to do that. They also created another pathway from the left internal mammary artery to the left anterior descending. We're going to index first bypass. Coronary, we're only coding one site because each site has a different piece of anatomy, 2 different bypasses. So bypass coronary, one site, you're given 0210 in the alpha. Next is your character value for surgical approach. States in your clinical statement that this was open heart surgery. You're going to choose 0. Was a device left in the patient? No. They're using the patient's own anatomy. In this case, in this particular graph, they're using their own artery. So there's no device. There's no man-made synthetic material. They're using the patient's own self to donate to themselves. Z is your character value. And then for our bypass characters, where did it come from? In this case, on this table for this procedure, the last character value qualifier identifies where it came from. It came from the left internal mammary artery. Final code for that first route is 02100Z9. That's the Lima, left internal mammary artery to the left anterior descending. The second one you're coding is the use of the saphenous vein. They use the saphenous vein graft to go from what to the diagonal? They had to go from somewhere. They're going to go from the aorta. The aorta is the main pump or main pathway of your heart, getting blood to your heart. So they're bypassing from the aorta to somewhere on the patient's diagonal artery. You're going to index the main term bypass. Coronary, again, you're coding just one site, 02100. It was done via open approach. What was used? A saphenous vein graft. That's reflected in your next character value of 9. And where did this bypass start? Your last character value is qualifier. It doesn't reflect where it went to, it reflects where it came from. It came from the aorta. 021009W. Then you also need to code, this first line should actually be down. You need to code the grafting of the saphenous vein. So I will fix this for you. I'll remove this line here because it really shouldn't be here, the first line. So you need to code the saphenous vein graft. The surgeon took a part of the patient's leg vein to do this graft for the second bypass that was done. They didn't take all of their vein, they took part of their vein from their leg. You're going to use the root operation excision. Your index and excision, vein greater saphenous left. That was given to you in clinical information. You get the code portion of 06BQ in the alpha. You move to the 06B table. States in your clinical information this was done via open harvesting. 0 is the value for open surgical approach. No device, no qualifier. 06BQ, 0ZZ. That code is just for the vein harvesting. So you have one code for one bypass route, another code for another bypass route, and the code for the vein harvesting. The next one is number 8. You have a suture closure of a PDA, open surgical approach. On the left here, you have a picture of a normal heart. You have the pulmonary artery here, and you have the aorta. You see how this is closed off. This channel, the aorta, is closed off, and you have the pulmonary artery branch, so to speak. This is a patient with a PDA. They have an extra opening here where blood is going to mix. Deoxygenated blood is mixing with oxygenated blood. That's not a good thing. That's not normal, and we don't want that to happen clinically. So the objective of a PDA procedure is to close this off. Root operation for closing off something is occlusion. We do want to close that off in this case. Occlusion of where and what? Anatomy, pulmonary left. We're given 02LR. States in your clinical information it's open. Typically, if I go back to that picture, the surgeon is going to put sutures here. Per ICD-10 PCS information back in Chapter 1, sutures are not considered a device that we reflect in our device character value choice. So therefore we choose Z. Even though they were used, we just don't identify them. Qualifier, the last character value. The only option when we move across the 02L table at that row, the only option is identifying again, in this case, exactly T for ductus arthrosus. Our final code is 02LR0ZT. So use your table as it's given to you. The next one is number 9. The patient is having an open excision of a left atrial appendage. This is also could be referred to as a maze procedure. This particular documentation again states it was open. A maze procedure can be done in different ways. It states open. It's treating an atrial appendage. It states excision in your clinical. It says open excision of left atrial appendage. You're going to index the main term of excision. Atrium, again the word atrium and atrial are synonyms. Then you have left anatomically. You have 02B7 given to you in your alpha. Your surgical approach is noted as open. 0 is your character value. Z, no device. And then for this particular code, you have to choose a qualifier value that relates to the atrial appendage, which is given to you in your documentation, and that is K. Your final code for an open excision of a left atrial appendage is 02B70ZK. Then the last exercise, number 10, per your clinical statement in your textbook, is a percutaneous transmyocardial laser revascularization of the left ventricle. The intention is to restrict blood flow to the left ventricle. The best root operation that fits is repair. They're not occluding it 100%. They're trying to restore blood flow by use of this laser. And it says laser revascularization. So we're going to index the main term of repair, then the location, ventricle left. We're given 02QL in the alpha. We move to the 02Q table. We verify our body part value. The next choice we have to make is for the surgical approach. It states in our clinical statement, percutaneous. That choice is 3. Then for our device and our qualifier, when we go across the row at that table, we have no choices but Z are given to us. So we have 02Q L3ZZ is our code for a percutaneous transmyocardial laser revascularization of the left ventricle. If you have any questions on the coding of these particular exercises, please post in the related forum in lesson 9, or of course you can inbox me directly here in Canvas.